everybody, and welcome to Amicable Academy, which is public information to educate anybody who would like to learn about a particular topic, and that is put on by the Amicable Divorce Network. I am Tracy Ann Moore Grant, and you don't have to remember all of that. And I am the founder of the Amicable Divorce Network. We provide low conflict family law solutions for families, and we connect them with appropriate professionals who will honor those wishes and get them through the divorce process in an informed, professional, but low conflict manner. We have a really great topic today that is very important to the amicable divorce process, and that is how you can help special needs children and families with the amicable divorce process. We are not just a network of professionals. We are also an out-of-court process that gets parties divorced without utilizing the court system. And one of the huge hallmarks and benefits of using that process is how flexible it can be, both on how much time you can take on a particular issue or with a family, as well as what professionals you can incorporate for that particular family. So I'm very pleased today to have two of our network members who I know are also incredibly passionate about helping families who have special needs children, helping those children and families get through the process in the best way possible. We have Emily Brenner, who is an attorney, a rabbi, a mediator, a million things. She holds all the hats in our network to help professionals, and Cheryl Rhodes, who is a specialist in this area and a mental health professional. And so at this time, I am going to turn it over to them. Ladies, if you want to introduce yourself a little bit better than I have and take the lead here, please do.
Okay.
Cheryl, I think you're up.
Oh, no, did you want to start?
I could, but you're the one who's come up. Tracy, are you manning the?
I am.
Oh, you are? So,
Yeah.
So you're currently on screen. Well, everybody, this is a great time to meet Cheryl Rhodes, who is the screen manner of our presentation today. I'm Emily Brenner. You hear my voice. You can't see me. Cheryl, could you put me on screen?
You should be on screen now.
I'm not. You're taking up the whole screen with the.
I can see you, Emily.
Yeah,
Oh, you can?
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. I can't see me, but that's all right. We have chosen to go into this topic because it is something that's coming up so often in family law. I think the last time I looked, which was about 1 second ago, 1 in every 44 8-year-old children were estimated to have an autistic spectrum disorder, an ASD. 4.2 times as prevalent amongst boys as amongst girls. These are very underreported, and autism is just one type of special need that we're seeing with our children. And as family lawyers, we need to recognize that there are some very, very specific difficulties that we have in providing the best for the kids in the family. So Cheryl and I have put together some information for all of you, whether you're here today live, whether you're watching on the YouTube channel or you're on Facebook looking at what we're talking about. You can always reach me. You can always reach Cheryl through the Amicable Divorce Network. So all you need to remember is ADN, and you can get your answers from us. So the first thing that we want to talk about is how kids how they benefit from the amicable divorce process, and why we would recommend to our families that we go through an amicable divorce process. I'm a lawyer. I make a lot of money when people are fighting. Why would we choose to go this way for our clients and specialize this way for our clients? And the answer is that it is the very, very best way to put together a customized team. And don't minimize the importance of that. A customized team, which you can't do under any other method. And I'll explain the different kinds of people that we might want to get on that team. We are able to do a different type of assessment for the child's needs. We can do a risk-based assessment, which is what we do. And Cheryl will talk to you about that later. But usually we look at what does a child need. When we're talking about kids with disabilities, we're looking at what are the risks in placements in different areas that we have to be especially attuned to. And sometimes that means that we need to customize the time frame. A good example of that is, when mom and dad both have very, very different views about the extent of the disability. We see very often that dad who's not taking care of the child day in and day out, if that's the case, thinks that the child is able to do much more than mom who is taking care of the child. And so we may need to send for some assessments. And if we have the parents on the same page, agreeing to get those, then everybody has their eye on the same ball. If we're just looking at what happens oftentimes when we're not doing amicable divorce, when we're in mediation, a lot of times we have expense and child support driven views of what the parenting plan should be. We also want to give parents the opportunity to just process the fact that they're going to be a divorced family with a special needs child. That has its own emotional processing time. And one of the things that we do in Amicable that I think is so important is to really give the parents time to adjust. I think we all know that when people are upset and afraid, that's when they make the worst decisions. And we want our people to make good decisions that they're happy with, that are going to last them so that they can do a good job with their child. Again, you see here access to other professionals. We want to be able to really customize our teams, and we do. We want each parent to have an attorney that endorses our process so that we're all on the same page in advising and planning. And we want our parties to agree that we're not going to file anything until we've resolved all of our issues. And if you've ever done a divorce case, and I'm sure that many, if not most of you have done a divorce case, you know that getting everybody to agree once the litigation process starts is very, very difficult. The litigation process started because we're each taking a different position and advocating for that position. So the more we can do on a cooperative basis, the better we can do for everybody. I'm also going to add something else. Amicable divorce turns out to be a lot less expensive for most of our clients in this situation, and a lot more effective, because when we talk about who needs to be on the team, we're talking very often far beyond the divorce process. We're talking about things like succession planning. In other words, what's going to happen in Georgia? We don't have it. We're one of 8 states in the country that doesn't have a provision for providing for after majority child support, for example, or support for our kids with disabilities. So we need to do a lot of planning for what's going to happen after that, or what's going to happen after the parents die, financial planning, estate planning, as well as a care plan. Cheryl, you want to grab that extra? You want to flip that?
Sure.
Okay. So given the disability or special needs, we want all parties to understand what's required of each parent in terms of cooperation and collaboration. And that's where the team really comes together. Typically, developmentally based parenting plans may not apply. And for all of you who've ever done a parenting plan, you know that we look at, it seems like every couple of years, psychology and law come together to determine what works best for kids at different ages. How long can a child be away from one parent before it impacts their ability to maintain a proper developing relationship with that parent? The younger the child is, the less they're able to maintain that in their mind. That much more so often with our kids that sometimes have processing problems or relating problems. So we can't really say that just because a child is 6 years old, they are more capable of, being away from a parent for a week than a child that's 3 days old. That's not necessarily true when we're dealing with our kids with disabilities. We need a very individualized assessment of what the child is capable of. Again, I've already said it, our future planning extends, that our special needs kids need consistency, predictability, and flexibility across settings and routines. And that is so important. That's been proven time and time again. It's also one of the reasons we really like working amicably, because a lot of times parents say, listen, I don't want anybody telling me what to do at my house. I don't want my wife or my husband to tell me what kind of food I can serve, what hours I should do, what needs to be the bedtime, whether they need to do homework when they first come home. We're finding that things like how long can the kids stay on screen time? When do they need to turn that down before going to bed? What should be the bedtime? Impacts the children's performance enormously. And so we try to get that kind of consistency and predictability across both houses. And one of the risks that we assess is the risk of a parent who's not willing to get on board with that. And we need to deal with that early on to try to, bring that parent in, to give them a sense that their input is very important, and it's important for them to get on board with this. We also need future planning to go beyond the time at one parent's house or another. The parents need to be able to interact well and to communicate well. And so we like to set up those parameters for communication, for regular communication between them, to let them know how the child is doing, to let them know what they need to watch for, so that when there is a transition between households or between caretakers, they're coming on board knowing that they're part of a continuum. The child may be having a bad week or a bad day. We want to know, how are the parents going to respond to that? We also, I mentioned it before, but post-majority care. The earlier we can get in and plan that, the better. There are very, very specific legal and financial considerations. And you see here on the slide, we're talking guardianships, trusts, succession, and intergenerational planning. Again, what's going to happen when you're no longer around if your child can't live on their own? What's going to happen if one of the grandparents leaves a sum of money to take care of the child, but it's given to the child in a way that destroys their ability to get financial benefits from the state? It can ruin the family, and we've all seen this happen. So we also want to keep it nice and hopefully cooperative, because we need to work intergenerationally also. And that's something that in this particular area, we cannot emphasize enough: the need for having what Cheryl's going to introduce, a roadmap, or in her case, since she's Cheryl Rhodes, it'll be a Rhodes map of really what things we need to look at for each child, going through where they are, where they come into the process, all the way to end of life planning. And that's what we want to do while we have all the parties in the room, and can work that into an agreement that will have some teeth in it and some stay power. Risk assessment. I've mentioned it before. I believe in our materials, we probably have a chart on that. If not, I know we've put it up before and you can get it from us. There is a very different way of assessing the kids, the special needs kids, in terms of which parent is going to be able to provide what care. And that's, instead of looking at the child's needs, which is the usual way we're trained to look, what's in the best interest of the child in terms of their needs, we look at risks. We start out looking at risks. Why? Because the first thing we want is to do no harm. We want to look at what are the risks to this child if we don't meet certain criteria. And that goes for the risk of having parents not understand what the doctor's saying, risks of parents using the disability for gatekeeping, risks of physical harm in the home, in the school, risks of not being able to get the best care for the child because of financial benchmarks that haven't been met, trusts that haven't been set up, etc. It's lengthy, and we will provide that to you. We also want, in our early meetings, because of all this that I've said, we want to focus on points of agreement and on what the expectations of the parties are. So we're going into our meetings with the parents already with the assumption that we're there to find agreement. So we're giving our parents the permission to disagree, permission to state their objections and their concerns in a place of respect and safety, and to have us be able to address those things with a problem-solving state of mind. Oftentimes, and I mentioned this before again, there's a big difference in perception between each parent's idea of what the child is going to need and what the risks are, and of their involvement. We have one case that Cheryl and I are both involved in, where the dad says, oh, I watch the child all the time when mom needs to go out. There's no reason why we couldn't do this 50-50. And mom says, yeah, he does. It's for like 2 hours. He puts the child on the computer to do something, and he does something else. But that doesn't get the child's schoolwork done. That doesn't get the child's skill set up or work with the child in terms of, interpersonal relationships or different things that the child has to do. So we have to be really specific about saying, what are we dealing with? What's the routine that we're dealing with? And what are the risks that one parent or another can't do that or has a very different view of what they're supposed to be doing? We need to get everybody on the same page. I know that we all know, I want to go to this issue of child support. We all know, if you are in the field of family law, that even though it's not supposed to be so, child support very often drives the desire to have more parenting time, because the parent, if you've got the non-custodial parent that has the child 50% of the time, they can get a deviation down and pay less child support. The one who has the child the most can get more child support. We have a lot of jockeying for 50-50 and for 225 types of agreements now, because parents don't want to have to pay for the time that they don't have. And that's one thing that we have to get out of the way very, very quickly with our parents. When we're talking about kids with disabilities, we're often talking about huge expenses, as I'm sure everyone here has either dealt with or can imagine. Special educational expenses, trust expenses, care expenses, and expenses that can change as the child's condition either gets better or worse, and as the child gets older. So we want to be able to keep that open communication as much as possible and keep the child support in the background. And so the way we approach that with our parents in Amicable Divorce Network is actually by being honest and telling them what I've just told you. And let's step back for a minute. We'll figure out what to do. We'll figure out how to handle this. We don't even have to call everything child support. We may want to set up a trust and have the parents be putting things in trust. There are different bank accounts, a type of bank account that we can set up in Georgia that can accept child support or be as a substitute for child support. So that's part of what we want to do in terms of our overall consideration of how we're going to move forward with the case. We also really want to avoid the competing experts thing that happens very often, where we have experts that are competing and are willing to testify to put forth one parent's position over the other. Any of you who've ever done really hairy divorces, I know I have, I know Tracy has, have had the situation where we frankly have to hire experts to put forth the opinion that we want put forth. And really what's motivating that is a control or financial decision or view for the judge. And here we really want to avoid that. It's going to be, we can get a victory that looks great this hour and is a disaster for the family hereafter. So we don't want that. The whole idea of doing Amicable Divorce Network is let's get on the same page. Let's identify the problems that we need to solve. Let's be honest and open in our teamwork, and let's pull in the experts that we need and the advisors that we need for this case. That's where we do a fantastic job in amicable divorce. Slide. Okay. Oh, here we go. Here's the risk protection factors that we said that we want to try to look at. Again, we have safety, parenting skills, medical needs, educational needs, therapies and mental health, advocacy. I'm going to talk about that in a second, and parenting plan schedule, financial considerations. I think I've touched on all of them except the advocacy. And I just quickly want to say that there is a lot of advocacy that's necessary with a special needs child, especially if they're able to go to public school. There needs to be advocacy for them to get services, special education plans, state services, monetary services, all kinds of things. And you need to have the parents really be willing to go to bat for that. And some parents are just better at that than others. And it's something that we want to bring up in talking to our parents about what is this child going to need and what is the risk if they don't get it. What is the risk that we're looking at here when we assess what the parents' roles should be? And I think this is pretty self-explanatory.
So I'm actually going to talk for a minute about some of these with regard to the children with special needs in particular, because obviously these are important for all children. But when you have a child with special needs, the issue of risk is the omission of this something that could cause harm, and is the presence of this something that could have some protective effect or a factor for the child. And that's why it's important for you to understand, as we said earlier, what exactly is the child's disability? To what extent could the child be harmed by some things that another child might not? So for example, safety issues. Let's look at home safety, for example. I've actually worked with some cases where elopement was an issue. So if a parent did not have locks on the house or a fence or other protective measures, and you have a child who's involved and can elope, it can be a matter of life and death. Swimming pools, especially for children with autism, death by drowning is a huge problem. Accidents and death by drowning are the two most likely causes of death of children who have autism, for example. Also, firearms in the home is another one. Some children actually have a fascination and an interest in guns. And if there are some in the home and they're not secured, again, you can see where this can be really, again, a deadly issue. The parenting skills become very, very important for all the reasons that we've talked about. Discipline is another issue that sometimes seems like families are on the same page, but if they don't necessarily, again, have a good understanding of the child's level, understanding, reasoning, the same discipline methods that work for other children in a family, if there's more than one, might not work for this child. And again, you have to make sure that parents really understand that. Medical needs, we want to make sure that children get the access to the care that they need. Prescriptions are filled regularly. Some medications, especially those that are used for behavior management, cannot be discontinued. You have to make sure that the child has that medication continually, and if they're not given in a timely manner or there's a lapse, that can also have an important consequence. Also, follow up in medical care. Sometimes there are situations where one parent is better at managing appointments, following up, and making sure that these happen as needed. I think Emily talked about the educational needs. The one thing I just want to call out is that a communication protocol on the parenting plan has to include things around education. Who's going to go to meetings? Who's going to be copied? Who's going to receive information? Who's going to have decision-making ability for authorization for tests, services, etc. Therapies in mental health. Sometimes there's a difference in accepting help, understanding how and why a certain treatment is recommended. The other issue really is that, again, as Emily said before, sometimes when you're going through the divorce process, there's quote unquote a battle of the experts, looking for someone who will not only share an expert opinion, but share a spin or highlight one aspect that proves one parent's position. And most importantly, the relative mental health of the parents is important to take into consideration, both as a normal state, but also the divorce process can be very, very stressful. And so you want to also be able to assess that in being able to see how well parents can work cooperatively, communicate, follow through, and do all the other things that we want to make sure to protect the child. Again, advocacy, it's very important. Some parents are better at that than others. You want to assess their ability, but also motivation. If they're interested and they don't have the skills, there are community programs, organizations that you can direct parents to so that they can learn those advocacy skills. But again, for you as mediators, guardians ad litem, and attorneys, it's important for you just to know that those resources exist in the community. We never want it to happen that a parent would not know to access services or know that there's an opportunity to appeal or to make other requests, and that would harm their child because they just didn't have the information. Parenting plan, again, a transition protocol has to be in place. Maybe for children with special needs, you want to make sure that there are a minimal number of transitions because this is going to be much more important. Predictability, and also that the parenting plan has to be consistent with the child's developmental age. So even if the child is 6 or 8 or 10 and they're functioning at a 2 or 3-year-old level, you have to make your decisions that reflect that, the child's ability to understand, to respond, to take direction at their developmental level. And then the last part is financial considerations. Does the family have the capacity to pay for special services or the ability to seek alternative resources? And again, I think this is one of those areas where directing families to an appropriate community resource can be very, very helpful, because there are some resources that are out there for financial support that don't necessarily mean that all that has to come from the parents themselves.
Can I just jump in and say one thing about what you said, Cheryl? I just want to add that the more our parents know what's going on, the more educated our parents are in all of these areas, the better they're going to be able to work together. So one of the things that we want to do when we work with these families is really give the parents time to really feel confident that they have knowledge in all of these areas. That's all.
And Emily, you mentioned the term gatekeeping before. I think this is another way that you can minimize that, because sometimes information is power, and you want to make sure that both parents have access to the information. They'll make better decisions. They'll definitely work more cooperatively, and I think it'll minimize some of that gatekeeping.
One question, I guess, is if as this comes up and we are a mediator or we are an attorney, I mean, obviously the people in this meeting today know that we can reach out to you all in the Amicable Divorce Network. Are there any other resources that we can recommend where parents should go to get this information that we can help them with and give them some more guidance on?
Yes, and just at the high level, probably if you were only going to share one or two, Parent to Parent of Georgia has a lot of really excellent resources, and they also have a roadmap, and they have resource and referral counselors, and so they can give families information on every one of these, from earliest identification through special education, appeals. They also have workshops, other resources on their website, and can help connect a parent to another parent mentor. The schools also do have a parent mentor program. Those parents are also in the schools to help families as well. And then pretty much it's an online resource, but there's a very respected website called Rights Law, WRIGHTS, LAW, and that's an excellent source of information regarding special education legislation, which is known as IDEA, Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, and any updates and changes in that legislation as those laws are reauthorized periodically. The stipulations change as well. So I think in the state of Georgia, Parent to Parent of Georgia, nationally, Rights Law, and there's also something called the Parent Resource Center and Parent Training and Information Centers. These are nationally, federally funded through the Office of Special Education Programs, and every state has a Parent Resource Center and a Parent Training and Information Center. Many states also have parent mentor programs as well. That's a great question, Tracy.
And of course, you can all see that Cheryl is an encyclopedia of information, so you can always call her. That's who I call.
That's right.
That's who I always call.
So the thing that actually excited me so much about joining the ADN network is that, as you can see from this is really talks about the work that I do. And mine really comes from my own experiences as a parent of now an adult with special needs who became disabled when she was 13 months old, and learning to navigate the system, and then doing a lot of parent advocacy and managing a large program at Autism Center of Excellence, where we tried to support and help families, thousands of families each year, and coming up with understanding a little bit more about what some of the needs are. What you'll see if you look through this is you'll see some words jump out at you. That we talk about this as a comprehensive planning is like a personal roadmap. And when I talk about a map, what I'm really talking about is to try to maximize, achieve, and protect assets, rights, futures also, based on research, best practice, and experiences of hundreds of families. And a successful plan should be customized to fit the individual and the family. Needs and priorities and resources change over time. So families have to be able to anticipate what some of these transition points are well in advance of them taking place, so they don't get caught short. And also, I actually think that going through an amicable divorce process, especially when a child is younger, allows the parents, when they're perhaps still on the same page, or perhaps can roll some financial costs into a shared pool, if you will, rather than anticipating years later that you're going to have to do some of these things. It also allows you to identify current gaps, if there are any, and look at the future needs. So it's a multi-general approach as well, and we also is family-centered and a strength-based approach. Our goal is to make sure that every child has all of the resources and supports that they need to maximize their own potential, and that they're able to be the most productive and the most involved in the community. And that only happens really when families work cooperatively, anticipate some of the problems, and have supports in place. When you talk about what those supports are in place, what's really important is to look at multiple areas. So we talked about the risk areas before. They're slightly different, but they kind of overlap, because these 6 key areas that we're looking at when we're trying to build the best possible life for someone with special needs is education, medical, financial, legal, vocational, and social recreational. Again, these
Can
children.
I ask a question?
Yeah, yes, of course.
You guys are talking about a lot of things for like families that may be sort of on the same page. Unfortunately, I've had a few cases as a mediator where like one side, and I hate to say it, in the cases I had, dad perhaps, is kind of looking to sort of wash their hands of the responsibility. What, if anything, would you say? How might you phrase things to try to get these two parents to work together and think beyond obligation? So in other words, they'll do I've had the situation where they're like willing to do what they have to do, through the child's majority or whatever. But when it gets to the idea that they're not any longer obligated in the state of Georgia, fare thee well, and one parent is left with the whole thing on their plate, it's quite overwhelming. And so I'm just wondering, have you had any success in sort of turning those folk into more cooperative? I mean, what advice do you have in that regard, or how might you phrase things? I'm just wondering, because it's sad as can be when one parent is left with this tremendous responsibility and the financial obligation associated, and the other one skips on down to happy life.
I know, it's almost like, this is going to sound horrible, but I actually had a case where I told the mom who was going to file the divorce, don't file it here, move to a state that has post-majority support. Wait their waiting time and then file it from there with the child. I know that's a horrible thing, and that's not a mediator's thing, but most states will provide for, there's some states that will even provide for support when the disability comes up after the age of majority, because there are some disabilities that don't come up until after age of majority. Especially it could be, accidents, lots of different things that could happen. And there are a few states that will even do that. So that's something with your clients to look at. But, how do you make somebody the only thing you can do is guilt them into it. One of the best things is, take a picture of the child and just rip it in half in front of them. I'm serious. Sounds horrible, but it works.
Sounds very extreme.
What?
It sounds very extreme. I think Pam and I as mediators would both fear a complaint on that one.
Yeah.
Well, you know that I'm a mediator too, but I think that you can. I think that you can take the picture and say, this is what's going to happen if we can't get an agreement with this child. Their life is going to be ruined, and I need to ask you to take a little while to really think about, is that something that you want to walk away with?
Another thing also, I think sometimes what happens is that the anger and the resentment of, let's call it the non-custodial parents towards the custodial parent, drives a lot of that. Mm-hmm. And so if you can shift so that the emphasis is back on the child, presumably that's a child that they love and want to see the best for. You might even have to go back a little bit and have them look at shared goals. Can they agree on anything? If you can find 3 things that they can agree upon, like, what do you see as this child's best life? And if dad says, I want him to be able to be a conductor on a MARTA train or work at Chick-fil-A, what do you need to do? What do you need to put in place before that to help that child have his best possible life? So that's one idea, is to keep the child center in the focus, take the pressure off the 2 parents or the power play. 2 is, that's what I was saying also about planning early. If you have a pretty good idea that, say, guardianship or special need trust is going to be necessary, but that it might not come into play until really close to that child's 18th birthday, when dad's already out the door, then you could recommend that the parents build that in somehow into structuring and getting that done ahead of time. That's another thing. The other is that could also influence decisions on division of property, who's going to stay in the house, what's going to be best for that child and his or her special needs. And if you are going to be looking at funding, I had a situation recently where the young man is going to need funding, but dad controlled all of the tax returns. And so mom couldn't apply for this particular government funding program because she didn't have access to tax returns and other financial data that was required. So we did talk about that, and he did kind of change his position once he understood why she was asking for it and how getting that particular funding would benefit the child. In this case, it would benefit the child significantly in terms of that financial plan later. So dad could be instrumental by just releasing information in helping mom get the funds for the child.
Cheryl, is it possible just to suggest that someone at, perhaps you or someone at your organization can do a consultation of sorts to sort of educate people as to some possibilities that are out there, refer them for some thought process prior to sort of developing their parenting plan?
Yes, and actually, Emily and I and Tracy now have had a few cases together where I've done just that, which is actually clarified by meeting with both parents, trying to help them come up with 2 or 3 goals that they can really agree on, really getting a much clearer picture of what are the child's strengths, limitations, and a little bit of a sense of projecting down the road what that child will need going forward, and then making recommendations. Obviously I can't say you have to do this or that, but if you make the recommendations strongly enough, then perhaps somebody else can try to work at getting those accomplished. The same thing with certain language that you might want to make sure goes into the parenting plan.
Yeah.
I actually bring Cheryl in right at the beginning, almost all the time, despite what I said before about, wanting to sometimes you really feel that way though, because you do have the parent who just really doesn't want to have anything to do with it. I mean, to get them to Cheryl, they have to be willing to go to Cheryl. And so saying, would you just, for the sake of just the case, even if it's to tick off a box, would you do this as part of just being a parent? Go in and learn about it, because you might be surprised at how much you can really be a help without it being a real burden to you. But sometimes you just do get those parents that just want to be out. They just want to leave.
Yeah.
And it's a very bad feeling.
Yeah. And then the last thing, Pam, I know we were talking about financial, but the other thing is sometimes, again, you can just appeal to somebody's charity, perhaps, by talking about the importance of their role that is exclusive of being financial. Whether it's visiting with the child or driving him to camp or producing documents. I'm actually working with a family now where we worked for 8 months to get this child ABA. He has autism and severe behavior difficulties. Mom just went back to work full time. Dad had agreed to allow the ABA therapy to occur at his house, that the school bus would drop them off. Mom got notice on Monday of this week that therapy was going to commence on Wednesday. And on Tuesday night, Dad said, we can't do that anymore because this has changed.
Wow. Okay. I know the whole circumstance is extremely overwhelming for the family. I do have family members that have this issue on the spectrum, and it is an extremely overwhelming thing to go through. And I think somewhat appealing to a parent's place being overwhelming and being such a difficult thing that the average soul does not understand. And I've tried some of that route to just sort of, congratulate them on the work that they've done for this child that was certainly not part of their plan, I'm sure. And trying to help in that regard to get them where they need to go. But thank you so much, Cheryl, because I think some of what I've run into is folks that are just so overwhelmed or perhaps have their own mental health issues, they just cannot deal with it.
Right, and that's why it's really important to do that assessment, because as much as you want to try to intervene, you may just discover that that's the case, that right now the best thing that is possibly just for that mom to, you know, take care of themselves and maybe help the family try to get respite or something like that in a more practical sense. Can you see, not sure if people, I guess it's just Tracy and Pam really, but can you see from your cases, we brought some cases here, we didn't discuss them, but how amicable really could be beneficial to, this process could be beneficial to children with special needs and their families?
Yeah.
I absolutely can. I'm sorry, Tracy Ann, I didn't mean to step on your toes there.
No,
You
not at
know,
all.
people are already in a mind to work together if they're choosing to do amicable. So then I feel like you've got a foot in the door already towards the idea and the concepts of what you're talking about, to pull someone like yourself in to help them sort of really assess and determine best ways. But I do sort of see that as coming from the lawyers more than the mediators. And the mediators sort of coming into the process after some of that work's been done. I feel like the lawyers need to, because they're the ones advising and advocating for their client, we're neutral. And so the lawyers in this community probably need to be really well versed in the services offered out there. And I know there's people out there, I know there was another training of this sort that was done by an attorney down in Roswell several months ago, who actually has a child of her own with special needs. And
yeah, it's Melanie Hilton.
No, Marcy.
Oh.
And I think there's a lot of interest in it. Timing, of course, you know, but everyone's work schedules and whatever as to who can attend and who cannot attend a certain training. But to me, I think the lawyers are the key folk in getting their clients on the same page to consider the options, to look at the assessments, so that when it does come to mediation, we need to be aware of those kinds of things as the mediator, so we can help them sort of finish the process if they're undecided. But the introduction and so forth, I think, is better served from the attorneys, because we have to be careful what we suggest or refer to as neutrals.
Can I just jump in for 1 second? I agree. And I want to toss out an idea. It's one that I have used, but I'm not sure how other people might feel about it. But there are some specific phrases that need to go in the settlement agreement when you have certain kinds of trusts and specific areas. And what I've done a couple times is before the mediation, when we're scheduled, is to just send to the attorneys the risk assessment and the special wording that needs to go in, just so that they have it, and then they can choose to use it or not. But say that these are some areas that they may want to discuss with their client before the mediation to make the most out of the time that we have.
And you're doing that from the mediator role?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I know that that's very directive, but I just think in this area, so far, the attorneys have been really thankful for it, because I think there's a lot of liability that rides on being the attorney if you don't know what you don't know.
That's in a situation, and I've had one with Emily, where we have expressed to her ahead of time, we are using you because we have a special needs child and we're looking for your particular expertise in this area. And those are amicable cases as well. So to sort of touch on, I think, the question before as to what about, you know, amicable is good for special needs children. I think first it's making sure the public knows, the parents, even before they're choosing an attorney, that you want to find an attorney in this process because you have a special needs child. And the reason is because it is very flexible. In the cases, you know, that I've had with special needs children that are amicable, they take a long time. Sometimes a year, 18 months, and we have multiple mediation sessions as we meet milestones for assessments, different things that are happening with the child, which is a flexibility you do not have in the court system.
Right, and I should have said before that I'm talking about where I've been told in advance we're using you because we are families that have this.
And something else I think Pam was touching on, the training, just for anybody that's watching this, we do have our certified amicable divorce professional designation, and I guess you had a slide on that here, that's in October. And there's an entire day dedicated to special needs children that attendees can choose to take. We have the core training is 2 days, and then on the third day we're having 3 designations: special needs children, financial expert, or LGBTQ plus families and children, because this is one of the most important needs that we see. And so practitioners, interdisciplinary individuals that are coming to that training can choose to take an entire day of this. And if you're coming to the training and you're interested in more than one, we will reoffer this designation again virtually in the spring, so people can really capture that. And it could be that it's offered again next year, because it has been a very popular topic and a really good fit for Amicable. So our practitioners and members will have the opportunity to take a deeper dive to really get expert level training in this area, because we think it's very important. And for the Amicable process is an amazing and good fit for families to connect with this process and utilize it for their family.
Well, and more and more families
Cheryl are in charge of that day, so I'm sure it's going to be great.
Yeah, and more families are definitely experiencing, even if it's just the kid has one foot in the door of the spectrum, where and they don't know what to do with it. And so I think, for myself, the more I learn, the more educated I feel and more comfortable I am in working with those people who have those situations at hand. And you have to have the sensitivity to the stress factor that comes with it for these people. I mean, normal divorce stress factor is high, and add a few more layers of extra goodies, and you've got, people who are about ready to crack.
I don't think I'm over speaking to say having a special needs child increases the rate of divorce in those families. Is that correct, Emily?
Yeah, that's
so
definitely true.
You're gonna see a higher population of those families in the divorce system, and we want them to know we're a resource. We have the flexibility, we have the professionals to help you get on the other side of this the best way possible. That the court system, with the adversarial nature is terrible for these types of families and the children involved particularly.
I also want to say that there's a high percentage in families with a child that has special needs, especially when it's some kind of neurodiverse need, that you may have one or both of the parents who have issues like that as well. And Cheryl has a special designation, or you can say what it is, but deals with autodiverse couples also. She has a special certification. And that can make a very big difference, because if you have a parent that's also, say, for example, on the spectrum, and they have kids on the spectrum, it multiplies the complexity. And so being sensitive to that, and the fact Pam, you said something so important, 1 foot into the spectrum. You can have somebody where you can say, I'll call Cheryl and say, I have this, I really suspect that my guy has, is on the spectrum because he's so this or this or this, like rigid. How should I approach this? And it's very helpful to have that you said, that sensitivity. And I think that's really true.
Yeah.
The more we know as professionals, no matter where we are in how we're helping this family, whether you are even, the real estate agent they reached out to first, to say, we're looking at selling our home because of divorce and we haven't taken any other, steps yet, the more we can educate our members about why this process is good for this community of families, the more people that we can help, and all of our professionals, helping them along the way, whether you're the attorney, the mediator, the mortgage professional, anybody that is, coming into contact, because we're finding families that are amicable minded are not necessarily going to attorneys first because they feel like attorneys are going to add conflict. So
Right.
they're going to mental
Yes.
health professionals. They might start with trying to do an out-of-court mediation. They might get their home valued. They might, try many different things before the attorneys because they're not trustful of attorneys. And so we want to make sure that all of our professionals know how to help these families facing these challenges, because the amicable process can really assist them. Thank you very much. Everybody who's on here is welcome to stay and continue to chat. I want to thank Emily and Cheryl so much. If you ever have a family that you come into contact with that has these challenges, they are both an open door policy. They are full of information. They are full of resources, and they can really help you help the family. They can jump in and assist. And so have no reservations about reaching out to them, because they are both such big hearts and brains full of information to help. So thank you all both for this presentation. I look forward to October and what our full day will provide there. We're going to end the recording. Thank you everybody for watching, and of course, come back for more information and resources. And if you want to stick around and chat, for those that are live, please do.
All right.